A piece of geeky Torah trivia is that only 5 of the 54 Torah portions that are read throughout the year are named after people. And some of them are named after non-Israelites, including Yitro and Balak. And yesterday, a congregant asked me, why is this Torah portion, which includes the giving of the Torah, the revelation at Mount Sinai, in some ways the pinnacle of the Exodus, the quintessential part of the Torah, by the ark behind us, and all of the depictions of the Ten Commandments. Why is Yitro, Moses' father-in-law, given the name of the portion? We don't even have a portion named Moshe or Aharon or even Miriam. The closest we get is Pinchas, Aaron's grandson. So what is going on here? Well, the cynic in me a little bit, or sort of the more logical one, says it really doesn't matter. The names of the portions are just from the first regular word, the first non-vayidaber word that is there. And so it's just a coincidence of sorts that Yitro is the name of the portion that we read the Ten Commandments. But Judaism encourages us to still find the meaning, even if it's not the sort of the true, real reason, even if it's just by coincidence. And so thinking about it, and Rabbi Sticker got into a little bit earlier, is what does Yitro do? Yitro, as an outside observer a little bit, a guide and a mentor to Moses, says you can't do it alone. If we are going to form a new nation, which I explained last week, and what God actually says, they can't go right to Israel. There has to be nation building. It can't just be one person administering the people. It is too complicated. Government, bureaucracy is too complicated. And so many people have looked to what goes on in chapter 18, then followed by the Ten Commandments and the Torah at all, saying, what is the ideal form of governance that is out there? And clearly we've had millennia of human civilization grappling with that. And we have a Jewish tradition. And what is in that tradition? And so I brought some text today, and I apologize to those online. I'm going to read some just snippets of it, and I'll be glad if you email me after Shabbat or when I post this later on to put the texts that are here. So what text did I bring? Texts that I quote here, sources on democracy, liberty, and minority rights. And these are texts that I didn't gather. They were actually gathered by my teacher at Rabbi camp that I go to every January, the Rabbinic Training Institute, by Rabbi Gordon Tucker. He was the longtime rabbi of Temple Israel Center in White Plains, I guess our sister Temple Israel. He was once a dean of the rabbinical school, and now in his retirement, he's more than 80 years old, he is back at the seminary doing the thing that he loves, which is teaching. And given what's all going on in Israel, in America, in the world, he wanted to show us sources that he says speak to the moment. And I'll talk at the end just how we go from the ivory tower, which has always kind of been a critique. Why are you looking at these ideal texts? What's on the real world? To perhaps what we can do. So the first source, and he brings it, and actually both of them are from David Brodsky, and the name of the article is called The Democratic Principle Underlying Jewish Law. And it was in a periodical called Grinspoon from Purdue in 2018. And I'm just going to read that last paragraph that I did. We gave 2 paragraphs that he quotes Robert Gudin and Michael Morell, arguing that for democracy to be efficacious, it is helpful if members of society learn to communicate with one another, to be able to hear and understand the position of the other. That in order to have any dialogue, any democracy, which we know is about compromise, you have to be able to put yourself in the position of the other. that requires empathy and also being able to abstractly think from another position. And Brodsky brings up something that is often brought up, is that is what the Talmud exactly is. And so I'm going to use lots of X's and Y's. I'm going to try to keep it as simple as possible, but know that obviously Talmud study is complicated for this reason, because it is very abstract. Often people like a visual where they're moving things around, but the purpose of the Talmudic sugya is to analyze. It's about the thought process, not the outcome. The law outcome is later, and we can see that even in legal circles, where they debate, and it's later the judge who then finally has to kind of filter everything and come to a conclusion. So it begins obviously with a Mishnah. There's a Rabbi X and a Rabbi Y. And Rabbi X says the law is A. And Rabbi B says, no, the law is B, not A. And just leaves it at that. Now, yes, practically we're supposed to follow the majority. But the Talmud rabbis said, not always so fast. You need to understand the rights or the thinking of the minority. And so that's where they say, from where does Rabbi X get law A? And obviously the Torah and their interpretation is the thing. Verse 1. Well, if Rabbi X is used verse 1 for law A, what does Rabbi Y do with verse 1? He gets law C from it. And now we have a verse 1. We don't have a verse yet for Rabbi Y, and we have a law C. So now we have to say, and it's back to B still too. Number 3, well, what does Rabbi B get law B from? Rabbi Y get law B from? Verse 2, okay? And then we have to sort of say, well, what does X do with verse 2? He uses it for law D, okay? And I'm sorry if this is like getting complicated. And then I'm going to end with 5. Then what does Rabbi Y derive law D from? From verse 3. Okay, and we can sort of see the whole sort of thing, okay? And so the whole point of this is not to get to a conclusion. It's to flesh out the points of view. From X, he has these verses and these laws, and Y has these verses, sometimes the same verses, actually, he has to use the same verses, but he's going to do something different with the exact same material. And we know that with law, or even an actual case. You witness, I don't want to go as bad to a shooting, but you witness an altercation, and 2 eyewitnesses can say different things, because there is so much going on in our minds, so many assumptions, and so we have to be able to say, what was their perspective? Where were they coming from? What do they know? Let's say someone slipped. What do they know about the materials of wood or ice or things like that, or the bottom of their shoes? Who knows, okay? Who's liable when somebody slips? And that's why there's case law and sort of understanding what comes from that. Number 3, Moses Mendelssohn. Later on, now I'm jumping obviously to the 1700s. He's considered in some ways the father of Jewish modernity. He was an observant Jew. Fortunately, his family did not stay observant. Felix Mendelssohn is, I think, his grandson or a nephew or something like that. The composer, not Jewish anymore. So, but still very much trying to come to grasp, how does Judaism come into group with modernity? And so he says that God programmed diversity and pluralism into the world. And so he uses the word providence, okay, this idea of what God's plan is. So let us not pretend that conformity exists where diversity is obviously the plan and goal of providence. Not one amongst us thinks and feels exactly like his fellow man, okay? And if we try to do that, if we try to make everybody think exactly the same, they are going to frustrate the very purpose of creation, where we're supposed to have diversity. So there is a drive in us to say, I'm right. My view must be right. They have to think exactly like me. But Mendelssohn's reminding us that actually that is against God's plan. We have to embrace diversity. That is where the divinity is found. And the final source that Rabbi Tucker brought is Vladimir Jabotinsky. He is not known for being your kumbaya, peaceful Zionist of the time. He was rather militant. We'll leave it at that. But towards the end of his life, and unfortunately he died, I think in 1946, 47, so he experienced the horrors of World War II, but he was not able to live for May 14th, 1948, which would have been beautiful for him to be able to see. And so he, again, sort of talks about how in the 17th century, it seemed that the pinnacle of creation was to be a cog in a wheel. Modernization right there, okay? There should be, a hierarchy, start with a king, a monarch of some type, and you just have to do your will for the state. And he says that that's not the case. He says that democracy, yes, is defined as the rule of the majority, but where does that lead? That leads to a dictator. And he saw what happened in the Weimar Republic. It was elected by a majority, but the minorities were persecuted. The minorities' power, the Jews, were stripped of their liberty. And so he reminds us, okay, remember, he's thinking about a new Jewish state. It's 1946, 47. He reminds us the purpose of democracy is about liberty. And even regime support by a majority can negate liberty. And when there are no guarantees of individual liberties, there is no democracy. And so the whole purpose of democracy, he says, is to ensure minorities of influence in the affairs of state, because minorities are composed of individuals created in the image and likeness of God. And so notice how they're all thinking a little bit about going back to basics. God created the world. God created everybody in God's image. God created all of us diverse. And so what are we supposed to be doing here on planet Earth when we have these urges to all want to think alike, to think we are the right ones, and we want also things to happen. We want what we want. We don't want the other person. We're competition also. And that's where we need to work together to hold on to those urges in liberty and law, which is actually in the My Country 'Tis of Thee song about how we live in liberty and law. We need both together. Now, we're not in the government. I mentioned this last week. But if we can start to mimic for ourselves, to practice for ourselves, to practice how to listen to each other, listen to others, and celebrate diversity, and then use that in how we vote or whatever we need to do, then maybe we can start to continue to improve upon this country. There is a lot of good bones in Israel, in this country. I'm not going to go through all the ways to fix it, but let's use these sources and use our creation from God, our gift of life, our gifts from God, in order to make the world a better place. Shabbat Shalom.